Love often takes unexpected twists and turns, but that just makes the story more interesting.
My eye caught her, and that was it.
Oh my goodness, I think I'm falling in love with this boy.
I told my husband, if you marry me, you're going to laugh for the rest of your life.
Join us as we continue to bring to life the Canadian love stories of romance, family, friends, and community.
Well, love is the most important thing.
And I remember I went to Lawrencetown Beach with all my friends, and I remember floating in the waves, and I was just watching the waves, and I'm watching my friends, and I'm looking at the horizon, and I'm like, I'm living in the best damn province in the country. And I remember I was like, oh, the ocean has a way of like resetting me. It's one of the places I feel most at peace in my life is being underwater. It's like freeing. I feel like I'm an astronaut or like I'm on another planet.
Okay, Madison, we are doing a deep dive for this episode of the Canadian Love Map podcast. Tell me how you found this amazing guest.
Well, you know I love a good social media star, and I just wanted to do something with the Maritimes specifically, and the love of the ocean is so much fun, and it's such a different approach that we've never really talked about before. And yeah, I just found him on TikTok, and it worked out for me before. I thought I'd try it again, and it did, and it was awesome.
His name is Saltwater Sean.
And he does dabble in freshwater.
I think we should just dive in before we offer any more puns.
I think we should too.
Rapunzel. Here we go. Okay, so it seems appropriate, given that I met you online, to start by saying, hello, Saltwater Sean. I'm Nova Scotia Nancy.
Yeah.
Let's introduce ourselves by our handles.
Yes,
that
that's
seems
right.
Very 2025
That's
kind
right.
of introduction.
Yes. Well, I'm Sean McMullen. I go by Saltwater Sean online on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, all those.
Threads.
I use Threads to my advantage. Threads is a really nice positive platform that I'm enjoying lately.
I watched one of your videos and I was really touched by it. You talked about your challenges with tinnitus or tinnitus.
Yeah.
And the quote came to my mind that I heard recently. It's from a play about Rita McNeil called Dear Rita.
Okay.
And it goes something like this. Someone out there has a wound in the shape of your words. And
I like that.
I thought that was beautiful what you shared about your struggles, because you know that is going to hit someone in the heart, whether or not they happen to have that challenge in their life. It's going to somehow be a mirror for their own.
I agree. And I think that there's something to be said about vulnerability online as it is, and not as a means to get something back from it, but just to share your authentic self. I think that's one of the powerful sides of social media that people may have forgotten about. Everyone seems to curate themselves online, and this is the best part of my life. These are the highlights of my life. And it just didn't really it never sat well with me. Mm-hmm. And I always just thought that, well, if I'm authentic and I'm vulnerable, those stories I share have led to opportunities that I never would have happened had I not been vulnerable or shared it, or someone's reached out to me and said, I'm going through the same thing, Sean, I just couldn't articulate it. And now I don't feel as alone. And that's all I wanted from other people, is like when I've got a strong family network and friends and people in my life in my corner, which I'm grateful for. But there's a lot of people out there who don't. So if they see someone online, even if it's a stranger, but he's sharing something online, especially with men sharing vulnerabilities online, there's not a lot out there. I think that's changing too. But there's nothing embarrassing about sharing about what you're going through.
No, I think it's funny in this world that vulnerability is seen by so many as a weakness rather than a strength.
I agree.
And I also think it's kind of hilarious that in 7 sentences, I would say you just summed up my entire book from showing off to showing up. I could have saved a lot of time and asked you to just encapsulate it. Let's talk about how you became so high profile online.
Okay. Well, January 2020, it coincided with a lot of things that I had been doing that had led up to that point in my life. January 5th, 2020, I stopped drinking alcohol. I was done. I wasn't an alcoholic, but it didn't serve any purpose in my life. Mm-hmm. And I was like, why am I doing this? I don't need this. It doesn't serve me. So I stopped January 5th, and then I started training to climb mountains. I was really into getting into scrambling up mountains like Mount Katahdin in Maine, Mount Washington, some mountains in Alberta. And I wanted to start training to climb glacier-covered mountains. I signed up for an alpine course with my friend Kyle, who lives in BC, and him and I were going to fly to Washington State and climb Mount Baker. This was February 2020, and we started. I went to the gym every day, and I was running, I was training, I was doing stairs, I was doing anything I could.
Everyone out there is thinking, oh yeah, I can see the horizon for him.
Yeah, that's right. They could see what's coming. And then March 2020, the world shuts down.
Yeah.
And so we're stuck in our homes. I can't go climb. I can't fly anywhere. I can't do anything. And then I was like, I could only do so many things in that house. I could only walk around my street in my bare feet playing guitar so many times. And then it was April, May 2020, things were starting to warm up. And I was like, you know what? I started watching videos online of people doing magnet fishing, where they take this giant magnet and throw it into the water and they pull up metal. And then I saw led to people diving or snorkeling. And I remembered that I liked doing that as a kid. I really loved exploring and looking for bottles in lakes. So I went and bought a wetsuit off Facebook Marketplace. I got my old fins and my mask from my parents' house. Yeah. And I went into the northwest arm of Halifax. And I just, right off Horseshoe Island, and I found some bottles, and I remembered a Pepsi bottle and a Coke bottle, and from like the 50s or 60s. And I remember that feeling of like, oh, this is awesome. I loved doing this. So I started doing that more and more just to get out of the house, because by that point, restrictions had relaxed. So I was able to move a little more freely. And then what happened was I was diving. A friend of mine gave me her GoPro, and she's like, you should film this. Like, you're doing this is pretty cool, because you were just sharing pictures at the time. So I got a GoPro and I started filming it. And I didn't know how to even make a YouTube video. Like I just put up raw footage and some music. And then I started realizing that I'm like picking up bottles, but I'm noticing all this trash and garbage. And I was like, I shouldn't be like picking and choosing and leaving stuff. So I just started taking it all and putting it in a dive bag and filling it up. And then I was like, well, I have all this stuff. So I started laying it out at the end of a dive wherever I was and taking a picture of it in the context of where I was in Halifax.
Both the treasures and the garbage?
And the treasures and the garbage. Yeah. And then I started sharing it online. I didn't even have the handle Saltwater Sean. And then what changed everything was June or July 2020, my dad and I went for a dive in picturesque Peggy's Cove, not off the Black Rocks, but in the cove right where you drive in. Everyone knows it here. Mm-hmm. And we got in the water and we dove for about 2 hours, and we took up 5 or 6 bags of trash and bottles and debris, and we put it on this dock. And Dad was like, my dad Jonathan, he was like, you should get it in the water and kind of just pose with all this stuff. This is cool. Like, this is a lot of things. Mm-hmm. So I did. I was already kind of like half dressed. I got my stuff back on and popped in the water, and I put my hands out like this. You can see the picture online. So we took the picture, and then I just shared it, tagged an account, Halifax Noise, I think, or in CTV. And we went to dinner somewhere in Tantallon. And then that night I put my phone back on, and the photo had went viral. Oh, it just had exploded, and all these people all of a sudden were following me. I had calls. There was 2 emails in my inbox from CBC and CTV saying, we'd love to interview you about what you're doing. This is interesting. And then from there, it kind of started to snowball. Like you
looked mystified. That's why I laughed. You look sort of mystified at how
I still am honestly mystified that so many people are interested in what I do as a hobby, as a side passion. Like, because I would do it if no one was paying attention to it. I just love it that much. Yeah. So the fact that it's resonating what I'm doing, it's very niche. Like, I'm just getting into random bodies of water, and I'm filming what I'm seeing, and then I'm showing it off. That's the formula. There's nothing else I'm doing extra. It's pretty raw. It's like, hey, I'm Sean. Today I'm at Chocolate Lake in Halifax. We're going to go take a look and see what we can find. Who knows? I don't know what's going to happen. Then I find stuff, and then I share it, and then I just go into the next one.
I think you're really hitting a sweet spot, though, in terms of entertainment.
Yeah.
I don't know is it called slow TV?
Could be, yeah.
Yeah, it's just this idea of all of a sudden people are really drawn to very simple
Yes.
video.
It's very simple.
And can be slow. It can be someone folding laundry.
Yep.
Who knows? This is much more interesting than that, Sean, for the record.
Well, people are discovering, I think they watch my videos and they don't know what I'm going to find either. So and if you're scared of water too or diving, it's fun to kind of watch along from my point of view because my GoPro's up here on my mask and you're watching basically what I'm seeing.
So we're actually experiencing it vicariously.
Correct.
Through you.
Yeah. So maybe that's one way. And then people, I think it also hits a lot of nostalgia points for people because they look at bottles like, I remember drinking that out of as a kid or finding stuff even further back, like historical objects from Halifax's early history or Canadian history. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of people who are interested in the history side of things. So it seems to hit a bunch of points for people.
Interesting. You know, I have two friends, my cinematographer who I work with and his girlfriend who's a production assistant and actor, and they look around on land. They have their eyes open all the time, and they find all sorts of amazing little artifacts just in the dirt and by stones. And I think so much of it is really having your awareness or your intention set to find interesting things.
Yes.
How much has that been part of your success, do you think?
I feel like I've got a good eye for things. I have a natural curiosity. I'm willing to get in water and places where typically people wouldn't think to go. Anything can be anywhere.
Yes.
Right? And that's a lot of fun to me. So every time I go out, it's more like, I don't know what's going to happen. So you get addicted to it, to the adventure. Yeah. Sometimes I find nothing. And honestly, that's a nice thing too, because that means the water's clean. Sometimes I like going to a place and seeing a beautiful, clean river. But most of the time, bodies of water here are full of debris because Halifax has been a busy seaport for 200 plus years. Right? Even longer. So it's just, there's a lot of stuff in all our waterways. So there's not going to be any shortage of things to come across.
So your childhood prepared you for loving the diving part because you like to snorkel.
Yep.
How did the rest of your young life prepare you for what you're doing now?
I had a pretty normal childhood. Dad worked, mom stayed home and took care of us. And they always gave us a pretty great upbringing and always took us out for hikes and adventures, and Dad was a diver as well, so I learned a lot from him. And a sense of exploration came from my dad. Caution came from my mom. And
I can relate.
And we had a pretty great upbringing where they kind of encouraged us to pursue our dreams and things that we were interested in, and made sure that they showed up for a lot of things for us growing up, which was wonderful. So because of that, in a comfortable environment, we went and just did things, and we would go to campgrounds or these places, and then I would always just kind of get in the water and go look around. So I remember even as a kid, like the first time I ever found something was like in a lake or a bay in Ontario at our grandparents' cottage. My dad, there's actually a picture of me. The 90s were a different time, but my dad put a scuba tank on my back when I was like 10 years old, and I'm scuba diving, no training at all, right? 90s were a different time.
And your mother was on the shore going, wait a second.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. But, that sense of wonder and exploration instilled to me as a child, I think has benefited me now. And I like doing a variety of things as well. So my mind is kind of always on.
And was it wonder and exploration that led you to the course of study you pursued?
I would say so, yeah. I've always had a natural curiosity about life, about people, about what people are going through, which led me to, I didn't know what I really wanted to do when I was done high school. And then eventually journalism, the concept of journalism, of telling stories, was fascinating to me because it was perfect. It was like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen in the course of a day. Perfect for me. And I'm going to roll with it. And I'm going to meet interesting people who I'll be able to share their stories. And I'm, kind of part of it, and I'm documenting it. And I just thought that was an interesting line of a career to choose. So I got into journalism school and ended up loving it. One of my dreams, I remember one of my biggest dreams I had at the time was I wanted to be sitting on a bus watching a guy ahead of me read a newspaper and seeing my byline. It was one of my goals I wanted to have, and it happened. Eventually, I wrote for the city newspaper in Belleville, Ontario. That's where I was at the time. And I remember taking the bus into the newsroom one day. There was a guy reading the paper, and he's reading my story. And I was like, that's cool. I like that. He's reading words that came out of my head, and he's absorbing them, and it's affecting him. And there's so much power in stories and words, and like we're storytellers by nature, humans. We have been since like caveman days.
It's the oldest form of communication.
It's the oldest form of communication, and it's something I think our world is. Everyone's sharing everything all the time, but not everything is always true now, right? So you do have to kind of filter out a lot of information. We have so much information. It's just like, well, whose stories, there's millions and millions of stories that are out there that are untold. Mm-hmm. So how do you, some people are choosing to use social media now as a strength to share their stories, which is great. But there's a lot out there that the marginalized people who don't have these platforms or don't have a reach to tell them. So I don't know. I always thought journalism, to bring it back, was a way to help people too. It's not just like I don't think I've ever said that before about journalism helping people, but it does help people.
It's a form of service.
It is a form of service.
We couldn't share the great stories that we do here on the Canadian Love Map podcast without the amazing support of Charm Diamond Centres. They are Canada's largest family-owned jeweler, and they're proud to be putting love on the map. The folks at Charm Diamond Centres are thrilled to be a part of your love story. So visit charmdiamondcenters.com or one of your local stores. Love starts here. Every love story has its challenges, and you love the ocean so much.
I do.
But I believe that was a result of loving
Correct.
the ocean so much,
That's right. Yeah.
How did it happen?
I experienced, I was in scuba diving training, getting my PADI certification at a pool in Dartmouth, and February 2021. And prior to that, I had a hearing test, and both my ears were fine. And so I was like, okay. And I had a little bit of ringing at that point, but nothing really noticeable. I just thought it was normal. And then I was in the pool, and I remember being down about 22 feet, not even that deep, and came back up, and I felt disoriented. I threw up, and all of a sudden I had this like ringing sound in my ear. It can be described as a tea kettle whistling in another room. That would be the sound.
All the time?
Constant, never ending.
Wow.
And sometimes it changes on my perception of it. But for the most part, you can actually hear it via a frequency matcher online. You can actually hear what tinnitus is, because you can't hear it. It's in my brain. My brain is producing the sound, right? But yeah, I came out of the water, and all of a sudden I was like, what is that sound? And then it just didn't stop. And I was pretty depressed for a couple months because it's like right now there's no current cure for it, even though millions and millions of people suffer from it. There's some amazing companies right now doing some work around this stuff. I'm no scientist, but like around stem cell therapy, gene therapy, nerve regeneration in the inner cochlea to potentially restore hearing loss, to restore hearing for people who've lost it. Wow. It's actually amazing. So I've done a lot of research on clinical papers and scientific journals. I've read as much as I could. So I don't know, like, again, and that goes back to my other point where it's like, if we invested money in these companies that are trying to help humans from whatever issue they're going through, and you could cure those problems for people, like that will just, you can save them from going to the doctor, you can save them from going to, whatever, needing psychologists to deal with stuff. And anyway, I had an accident from my love of wanting to explore the world in a deeper way. And then I took 4 months off I didn't do anything. And then I was like, you know what? I'm not going to let this stop me. I'll just keep my depth at a certain range that's safe. And then I just got back to it and just continued on despite the new condition.
How did it feel when you returned to the ocean? You
2
spent
years,
2 years or 3 years
Yeah.
in Ontario, and then other than that, you've always lived
Yes.
near the ocean in Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
When did you really figure out that you loved it?
This would have been actually, I actually remember this, September 2016 on my It's 9 years ago. So I was 29. And I remember I went to Lawrencetown or Martinique Beach with all my friends. And I remember floating in the waves. And then I had this insane feeling of like calm and peace where I was just floating and I was just watching the waves and I'm watching my friends and I'm looking at the horizon and I'm like, I'm living in the best damn province in the country. And I'm like, there's no one here on this beach except me and my friends. That's amazing. And I'm just floating in salt water and I'm riding waves in, body surfing, boogie boarding, whatever it was. And I remember I was like, oh, the ocean has a way of like resetting me. Yes. And so I started to I remembered how much I loved the smell of the air, the feeling of getting to a beach and you feel like all of a sudden the opportunities are there for you. Like, and so now I'm like, when I'm physically in it and I'm exploring it and I actually feel like the most at peace. It's one of the places I feel most at peace in my life is being underwater. It's like freeing. I feel like I'm an astronaut or like I'm on another planet.
A lot of people have a fear of the water, and rightfully so. The ocean can be really dangerous. I've lost a friend in a very, strange accident to a rogue wave years ago. And so I have some fear of it. But I also think there's a metaphor there for life. Like when you are in a state of resistance, it can really be turbulent. But if you can get in the ocean and go with the flow.
Catch a wave. Like life is like a series of waves. Sometimes you ride them in. Sometimes you get smacked by them and you're like kind of like free floating. Sometimes you get a mouthful of salt water and you're like, whoa, right? It's a good analogy for a lot of things in life. Maybe it's perfect for a maritimer like myself.
Do you feel like an activist now?
I feel like I've become one, but I feel like I'm a different type of activist. Like I don't go to like environmental rallies or I don't do anything like that. People say, why don't you use your platform to like shame people about what they're doing? And I don't like that approach. I more just let the video speak for itself without comment. I'm doing it. I'm just doing the action. I'm not saying this is a problem. You can decide that for yourself by watching what I'm doing.
And that is journalism. You're not editorializing.
No.
You're just presenting it.
Yeah. I'm not at this place. I'm like shaming all you fishermen for all these lobster traps. Boo. Like, no. Like, I don't know how any of this got here. I'm not going to make a judgment call on that. I'm going to take it out and then I'm going to leave it. And then you can decide what to do with that information.
What is the coolest thing you've ever found?
They were called torpedo bottles. They look like bowling pins, but they have like a pointy end on them. I found one with the name James Ruey on it and Halifax, Nova Scotia on the other. William James Ruey is the architect of the Blue Nose. So he bottled stuff too. He like
kidding.
Many business owners back in Nova Scotia, like back in early Halifax days, they had a lot of businesses, shipbuilding, bottling, all that. And so that was found in the Sackville River in Bedford. And it was one of the neatest. I didn't even know what I was looking at. But yeah, that was one of the neatest things I've ever come across. It's such a strange bottle design. And then I found everything from like laptops, phones, iPads to, I found a gun, knives, stuff you have to report to the police. Like you name it. Anything that's on land is in water, right? People just dumped everything back in the day, right? Back in water. So it's just like, it's either they buried it on their property or they took it out to the middle of a frozen lake and let it melt into the lake. Like that happens. Rivers are a culprit of a lot of garbage. It's just like, even today, there's like, you find stuff like Tim's cups and all the time, like just modern trash.
Oh my. So if you come across a weapon, like a knife or a gun, do you have to make sure you pick it up with a glove? I don't know the science of whether fingerprints survive in salt water.
The first gun I found, I didn't have my gloves, but it was a rusted sawed-off shotgun. And so I have it on video. It was put on the front page of the Herald at the time, 2021, or Saltwire, or whatever it is. And I was nervous because I was like, oh, I'm holding a gun. Now my fingerprints are on it. But it was completely rusted. But the RCMP came and took it, and they sent it away to Ottawa to determine if it had been used in a crime. They couldn't figure it out. It was too rusted. So that was fine. But another time I was diving with a friend who's actually an officer as well. We found a taped up double-barrel gun. and we both had our gloves on, and he was like, well, the dive's over. I have to deal with this. we were just exploring recreationally. I found not, but most of the time I'm wearing gloves. Yeah. Cause I have to, just to protect my hands. So yeah, I don't know if I find something, even like I found a hard drive once with like holes drilled in it. I reported that to the police. Phones, you find phones a lot, probably discarded, like ripped open and chucked for some reason. I don't know how any of this gets there. People, like, you can imagine the stories behind it. It's kind of fun.
And how do you decide what to keep? Because I presume you only have so much room.
I only have so much room, and I recycle most of the bottles, dispose of the trash properly. It's an ordeal. A lot of it's not even on camera. I'm just dealing with it after the fact, because it's like, all right, well, the dive's over. I've got 6 tires. What am I going to do with these? And then anything that's more interesting to me, I'll hold on to. But if it's potentially historical significance to the province, I want it in a museum. My dream is to have something in the Maritime Museum that I found. Like I'm like Indiana Jones. Like it belongs in a museum. I don't really want, I'm not particularly materialistic. If something I found could be on display, that'd be great. I talk at schools now. That's a new thing, and I share with kids like what I like to do, but then they get to hold some of the objects that otherwise would be behind a glass case in a museum, right? Like it's like a living museum they get to experience. So,
well, you talked about how your parents influenced your
right.
Interest in the world and your curiosity and your adventurous sense. What about your own kids? I know you have 3 children.
Yep.
How are you passing that on to them, and how do they feel about this exploration and joy of yours?
My kids, Zoe, Jackson, and Owen. I think they've seen me been doing this for 4 years now. My daughter, I think she thinks it's cool what I do, but she wouldn't come out with me. She's come out with me sometimes to be on a dock while I'm out diving, and she takes interest in what I'm doing. But she's 14. She's a teen, It's like, I don't know. And then my boys, they've come with me on snorkeling sometimes in lakes. And then I'm trying to instill in them the sense of exploration. They don't know what they're looking at, but it's fun to see them engage in kind of what I'm doing, because I was roughly their age. So they think it's cooler that I'm a YouTuber than not being a diver. It doesn't really matter what I'm doing, but they tell their friends at school that my dad's a YouTuber. Because YouTubers are celebrities to this generation right now. So they don't know who like movie stars are, like Tom Cruise or anyone, John Travolta. I don't know. Those are like pretty outdated ones.
But even though they are more impressed by the celebrity than the actual action, you are instilling them with this real deep sense of curiosity, probably more than you even know. Yeah,
I like to hope that and think that. I like to take them out with me on my adventures as much as I possibly can, and try to instill that sense of wonder that I had as a kid. Because I think kids are so glued to their devices these days, and they're so siloed in these worlds that it's just like, I think they forget. I feel like the decade I got to be a kid in, the 90s, I'm 38 now, was like the last great decade before the internet. And I got to just be a kid, and there was no internet. And then now, like, they have, like earlier we talked about, like the information in the palm of their hands. They can watch whatever they want anytime, and they might just like not realize that there's a whole world right outside their window.
Right, opportunity cost.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the current treasure in your life. Oh, he's blushing.
I am blushing. She's wonderful. Like, we use the term inseparable weirdo.
Oh yeah.
I went through a personal thing in my life where gone through a separation, but I don't need to talk about the details of that, but that was a year ago now. Mm-hmm. And, trying to go with the best path forward for her and our children. But that put me on a different path this year on a journey. It was like middle of October, end of October, I was like, I'm done. I deleted the app. I had an app called Hinge on my iPhone, and I was like, screw this. I don't need this. The week I got rid of it, I got this message from this person that I'm with right now. And she had said that she had been watching my videos for a long time, and not only on Saltwater Sean, but my other accounts where I was sharing my vulnerabilities and what I was going through in the hopes that it would help other people. And one video in particular, she took notice of. and it really resonated with her. And then she was away with her friends and her friend on a weekend, and her friends encouraged her to like, why, just do it. Just send him a message. Why not? What have you got to lose? Mm-hmm. And she was like, oh, I'm not sure. And she did. And I got this message, and it was like this long, like, case. It was just like, hi, my name is, and all these things. And I had never got a message like that before from a woman. Like, I was pursued. It was, I was pursuing. And at that point I was just like, well, I was going to, like, before that, I was like, I'm just going to live on a mountain alone with my kids. Yes. I'm not going to let anyone near me. And then we started talking. I sent a message back the next day. I took some time to, I was like, this is different. So I wanted to have a good response back for her. And then I was at a friend's, I was at Seven Bays bouldering with one of my good friends, Mike. And we had been talking by that point. And he was like, by that point, her and I had already talked on the phone. And then we had like a walking date together, and we just were learning about each other. And then we parted ways after the date, gave her a hug goodbye. And I was at Seven Bays with Mike, and I'm like, Mike, this is this girl. This is different. He was like, I was like, should I like try to see her again? And he was like, call her right now. You gotta do something. Like, this is there's something special happening to you. I can see it. So I called her, and I like threw her off guard, and she was like driving home, and she said she almost missed her exit, and she was like not expecting me to call after the first date. And I was like, can I see you? And she was like, yeah, okay. Yeah, well, so we made it happen. And then since then, we've just been inseparable. I've never met someone like her in my entire life. I've met a lot of people in my life doing what I do, and I've never met anyone like this one. She is unbelievable.
But it is so much like those very unexpected treasures you just come upon, in the course of your day. Yeah, and the fact that she, the things that I was saying resonated with her, and then that took her interest, and she was like, I want this one. Do you bring that same sense of curiosity that drives your diving to a relationship?
Yeah, I would. I do. And I've learned a lot this year from going through what I've done, and things I've learned from when I was married, and things I didn't want to do, and all that. But yeah, there's just a natural curiosity about her and wanting to learn about her and how she works.
So thank you so much for the way you're showing up. And, just keep doing what you're doing. I hope your kingdom just keeps growing.
Thank you. That's really kind.
Online and off. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you very much, Nancy.
Thanks so much for listening to the Canadian Love Map. This podcast is presented and made possible by Charm Diamond Centers. It's hosted by me, Nancy Regan, and is produced and distributed by Podstarter. We love sharing love stories of all kinds, and that could include yours. So do you or someone you know have an uplifting tale to tell? Reach out to us on Facebook or Instagram using @CanadianLoveMap or email producer@podstarter.io. We'll be back next week with another love story to add to the map.
You've been listening to a Podstarter production.